People dying is bad. Stop fighting. Choking on dick, Haru. Being a celestial spirit would be complete and utter hell. Ooh, contradiction. Ooh, wow. It's fucking nothing. Oh boy. Here we fucking go again. Fairy Tail. The overly long tirade on Fairy Tail. It's been a long time, and for many of us that means a lot has changed. For me here, that means who I follow on YouTube, who I'm friends with, and even the kind of content I make, all of which has both informed and reflected a changing mindset. Because I no longer agree with the tirade anymore, not rhetorically, logically, or emotionally. Even if by good, I mean like a 6 out of 10, as of my reading about a year ago, barely. But that's still a huge change from my prior score. While I still very much remember the person I was when I made the tirade, that person is one who created the kind of content I don't like to see anymore. While I have moved on, the bulk of my shift in views towards art in general is visible across the now 70 plus episodes of the Nen Show, which includes full discussions of both Rave Master and Fairy Tail. And yet, though my main channel content may reflect that very same journey, it was not made as one. As accessible as we try to make the Nen Show, later episodes build off the previous ones as we gain more experience and a pool of series to reference from. Yet my main channel videos not only have a larger audience, even for smaller ones, but are made to be standalone and consumable, even those I no longer agree with. Those that still very much continue to get views, including a set of videos that are spread around as what is still the largest teardown of the oft-maligned Fairy Tail. Having directly criticized another creator with whom I saw the faults of my content in his, I happen to fully agree with him in a lot of ways.
And I think that's fair as well, because someone with my kind of following, they should be scrutinized, like, heavily, because, like, I think it is important for, you know, people at that level to be held accountable for their mistakes, to be kind of kept responsible.
Casual as they might be, YouTubers inform audiences which should be held to a standard by those audiences. Yet at the end of the day, the one who's going to have the standard is the creator themselves. So I'm going to be a bit more direct. So much of my content needs re-examination, but the tirade is my biggest and most far-reaching. Thus, a critical look is long overdue. A few memes passed around a small community aren't going to affect that perception. No, seriously. Ooh, contradiction. Ooh. Oh boy, here we fucking go. Fairy Tail. But that's enough of that. This is the overly long tirade on the overly long tirade on Fairy Tail, because I can't help myself. While it will still be divided into multiple parts, and this first part will only cover the first video, it won't be quite as long as the original tirade. Later videos will be covering multiple parts, and with each one I'll be going through the good points, the bad arguments, and the ugly truth. The good points will discuss aspects of the video I still agree with, even if that means picking apart reasoning that is faulty despite continued agreement with the main sentiment or core point. The bad arguments is for parts of the video that are just flat out wrong and need correcting, because, holy fuck, you dumb shit, you can't even fucking read, can you? And the ugly truth summarizes my thoughts on the whole thing. So let's take the time and... we're gonna be here for a while. So let's fucking go! Considering that after Fairy Tail I'm known for One Piece, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that the sturdiest part of this video, and even the tirade as a whole, are the comments about Luffy. Or like, a couple of them. I like my reading about how Luffy encountering Old Man Toto serves as a microcosm for the conflict of the arc, and gives him the perspective needed to change the direction of the group. I also have a point about how Luffy's alliance is by nature free, comparing it with other alliances he's made. Though even if these points were by and large fine, they are trapped in this trash fire of a video. But thankfully I have since revisited the concepts with a much better understanding, and not for my lack of trying to ruin it. I want to point out that this is just my interpretation, bro.
Actually, my brain's broken.
Wow. If that was the good parts of the video, then... oh no. So, speaking fundamentally, the foundation of arguments for this video is something I disagree with. In the Super Eyepatch Wolf video, I talked about the pitfalls in comparing two things from different works, even using Luffy and Natsu as a visual to get at the self-critique. I was probably a bit harsh. Comparisons to some degree are inevitable, but the question that needs to be asked whenever any comparison is made from an authoritative voice is if it's helpful. Personal opinion is one thing, but the individual meanings and goals of the individual works being respected is another. And while I still hold the opinion of enjoying Luffy over Natsu, this video very much does not respect or acknowledge Natsu's character. Or at least, when it's actually talking about him, because roughly 4 minutes of the video are just discussing the Guild Arts moment and Tenra Island, the latter of which, for no fucking reason, and badly, very, very badly. The conceit of the general argument centers on the scene of Natsu and Guild Arts, in which Natsu's always try attitude is challenged. I argue that while this is a great character moment, it's not respected in the rest of the arc, with Guild Arts' lesson being subverted at the expense of the story. Then I tried to find meaning in Tenra Island and came up short, because I was trying to read ideas that weren't there and acting like that was all there was. Maybe if I was paying attention...
Read, nigga! Read!
Tenra Island does very much deal in generational conflicts, but rather than passing the torch, it would be more accurate to discuss how it touches on adherence to the previous generation and overall, unity as a means to surpass the previous generation when the young aren't strong enough to do so individually. This is even seen in Natsu vs. Guild Arts itself and the test as a whole, where S-Class members are alone, while S-Class applicants are paired up with fellow guild mages to make up for what they cannot do by themselves. And in regards to disunity, we see this when Natsu goes against the words of Makarov as he's told to run from Zonkro, something that directly responds to his lesson from Guild Arts. Guild Arts aim to teach Natsu fear and recognition of his limits, but giving up and running away isn't always the best response to recognition of those limits. When choosing to stand and fight against Zonkro, Natsu states that this is a different type of fear than the one Guild Arts was talking about. Unable to read between the lines, I completely dismissed this, revealing that I was actually dumber than Natsu. There's a plot twist for ya. The two fears Natsu refers to are fear of losing and fear of losing family. Natsu is incredibly competitive, and be it Grey, Urza, Gajeel, Laxus, or even Guild Arts, he naturally doesn't want to lose against them. But these fights are against family. To put in everything to win isn't really appropriate. They are play, not the real thing, and as such there are times when going all out isn't ideal. Guild Arts unleashing all of his power blurs that line, and Natsu giving up is him recognizing which side of the line he is on. For being able to show that restraint, Guild Arts passed him and helped to temper him. The fear against Zonkro is different because, even against a stronger foe, not giving it his all and running away sacrifices Makarov. Where giving up against Guild Arts does surrender his chances to be an S-Class mage this year, but as long as he is with Fairy Tail, there's always another year. By accepting his defeat and the possibility of losing, he succeeds in understanding Guild Arts' lesson. But giving up Makarov means he'll never see that father figure again. Loss is something to actually be afraid of, and something to fight against even if one is afraid, even if one doesn't seem strong enough to win. The disunity with Makarov then transforms into unity as Makarov recognizes Natsu's desires, the two of them working together to defeat Zonkro, returning to the idea of unity between multiple parties able to surpass one who fights alone. This right here is a fitting example of the ideas explored in the arc, one with a counterpoint represented through Hades. Hades chases after the darkness he believes the one true magic to be, idolizing Zeref, who he believed was closest to that. Where Natsu clashed with his senior and achieved the unity they could both agree on as a result, Hades follows Zeref in blind adherence, just as his own guild follows him without question. His false unity was one where everyone was loyal to him and him alone, to the point that their lives didn't matter. And just as he was unable to work with his guild, they were unable to work with each other. Altair had opportunities to fight alongside Cain, yet chased the goal of Zeref instead. And as a result, nearly every leading member of Grimoire Heart was defeated by Fairy Tail's unity where they were fighting alone. Juvia defeated Meredy when her heart was linked with Grey, Natsu and Lucy surpassed Cain, Loki and Capricorn with Zoldio, Rusty Rose was beaten by Freed and Bixlow. Grey is a bit of a strange case, but memories of triggered by Ur's traces left in the sea took Altair's will to fight. Urza and Guild Arts, S-Class mages, are the only ones to win their battles solo, following the same structure as the S-Class exam itself. But Urza also finds her strength in the guild that changed her into the person she fights as now, and Guild Arts wins when his power is returned after the tree is restored from Urza's victory. So even fighting alone, they still hold bonds to those they fight for. And of course, the climax pits all of the younger members against Hades, with support from Happy, Carla, and Panther Lily. A guild is meant to be a family, yet Hades built one whose members would be alone as long as they fought in the name of Grimoire Heart, just like Zeref so seemed to be alone. But his idolization was not based in understanding. He didn't understand Zeref and his ideals at all, and in refusing to challenge those ideas, Zeref would come to him with his wrath. Makarov argues freedom because, by being mutually free, he can come to agree with those he wishes to pass his torch to even after conflict. And through their unity, they were able to surpass him and defeat Hades where Makarov alone could not. My prior reading argued that the younger generation was not yet ready to succeed Makarov, a bad faith reading that completely missed the point. Individually, no, they are not ready, but together they are more than capable of representing Fairy Tail and moving forward as the next generation. And in service of my bad reading, I gave a number of faulty arguments. I point out that Acnologia would have destroyed the whole guild had they kept fighting instead of following Gildarts' lesson, and that Mavis saved them, even though Fairy Sphere was only used because of the guild working together. The argument I gave was a faulty realism argument, one that could just as easily be placed against any piece of media, including One Piece. Fighting when the odds seem low is incredibly dangerous, but a fictional story examining the incredible, exaggerated, and exceptional doesn't have to bend to arbitrary realism to get its messages across when it would be better served by following its own verisimilitude, something else I've already discussed. And it's common in basically every underdog story, which makes up a lot of stories. I make the same mistake again later when I bitch about contrivance. Yeah, Fairy Tail is contrived, just like every story. And the examples I give are equally applicable to One Piece and most anything else, really. Which in retrospect I consider an unforgivable mistake, as, while as bad as that video is, I did one on contrivance before the tirade. Suddenly my standards don't matter when it's in service of bad faith. You see that same kind of bad faith when I show Natsu defeating Hades alongside wording that implies it was a solo effort. Similarly, undercutting the help he got from Makarov against Songkro and not recognizing the tree's role in giving Fairy Tail mages power. While harping on how the arc has no meaningful, consistent message, I even highlight the lack of dichotomy. Dichotomy means contrast between two things that are entirely different. Yet despite using that word, I'm arguing something that's more of a scale. In my argument, I recognize the 3 generations of Guildmaster, veterans of the guild, S-class mages, kids. That's like 6 fucking groups in this dichotomy. Of course there's no dichotomy, there was never one to begin with. What the fuck are you talking about? You don't even know what words mean! And the worst part of all is, what does any of this have to do with comparing Natsu and Luffy? The origin of the argument is about how their recklessness is examined in their respective stories, arguing that for Natsu it wasn't meaningfully explored. I falsely believed it wasn't and barely spent any time on it, talking about a bunch of other things I saw as a failure instead. So in going on a giant tangent about Tenro Island, since it has nothing to do with the video, I'm just being a giant idiot for no real reason. This kind of absolutism also hinders other arguments. Sure, I can say Luffy is more creative a fighter overall by comparing 2 similar fights, but that undersells the moments Natsu does have in fights of his own. I also point out handout power-ups, or rather like one that actually helps him win the fight. He does get lightning from Laxus, but it doesn't secure him a win against Hades at all. Though if we're going to talk about the hard work thing in Fairy Tail's magic, then I'll just hold off until the discussion of part 2. There's also the part where I bitch about the world-ending threat after world-ending threat. Okay, sure, it can get tiring, especially for one disinterested in the story, meaning it's really a personal preference thing. But what does that have to do with Natsu? I even recognize that main story progress happens basically every arc as more and more of Zeref is shown. We still have a couple more points to go through, and oh boy, if you thought I was only wrong about Fairy Tail, then we're both going to be surprised. Because as we know, Luffy's character flaw is his recklessness. So luckily, as mentioned, I have a whole video pretty much on this idea. As here, the reading is incredibly shallow. I focus primarily on the willpower, but nowadays I would argue that sacrifice and the courage to make the attempt are stronger ideas to frame Luffy's character with, because that's far better than saying, oh, failure is just a part of life. Yes, making the attempt can result in failure or success, so both are understandable results, which might be true in life, but in a story, whether a character succeeds or fails, and the outcome of that result, is important in how meaningful that course of action is intended to come across as. And in regards to One Piece and even Fairy Tail in some ways, the will to try is rewarded, with failure so often leading to the chance to try again. After running away the whole arc, the Idol's Fairy Tail Guild steps up to help in the end despite their lack of power, supporting the main guild who went in to try despite all odds, evoking that miracle you'll see in One Piece, where even defeats are never the end. So not only is it really reductive to say that Luffy has recklessness as a flaw, it's admitted as not even being a correct observation in the tirade. While claiming it's a flaw, I show Luffy punching Helmeppo. Later I argue that Natsu's flaw isn't really a flaw as it had no meaningful negative consequences explored, yet Luffy punching Helmeppo doesn't either, even though that was the footage of Luffy's supposed flaw. He goes to whine to Morgan, who literally doesn't give a shit, revealing that the power Helmeppo's been wielding is ultimately not his, showing his weakness as a person, and his dad even says that he doesn't even value him enough to strike him. Again, nothing bad comes of this, and even Luffy's later defeats often earn him respect from one party or another. making the outcome not wholly bad even when his will to try leads to failure in some aspect. It's bad. It's not good. Watch the Luffy video if you haven't, please. And then there's the part I got the wrongest. So wrong I basically made the lies video to address it. Naughty the Exceed overheard Mystagon and Panther Lily and ran to tell Natsu in their hesitance and debate. Gaping hole in my argument aside, like with Tenroll, I also take this opportunity to bitch about things that don't matter to the overall point of the video, harping on Mystagon being stupid and not recognizing what his plan would accomplish. Of course, the problem of his friends going home and his lack of foresight is an issue to the self-sacrificing prince who wanted atonement, dying to solve his problems rather than living to solve his problems. Natsu saved him from his short-sightedness. That's the point. It's important to note that when charging Demon Lord Dragneel, Mystagon still relied on magic even though the reverse anima was draining it from the world. He, like much of the country, feared not having magic, and Natsu fighting him was as much to convince him that he could live without it as it was to convince his country. And for the last thing I want to get to here is Natsu's character motivation. Because remember, characters can only have one motivation. Natsu can't want to find his dad and also have a desire to be with his family and help them. Oh wait, he does. Among the main cast of Fairy Tail, I can earnestly say Natsu is maybe just above Wendy as far as how much I like them goes, with Gray and especially Ursa and Lucy being characters I enjoy much more, where with One Piece Luffy does happen to be my favorite among a main cast I already really love. But me liking one thing over another is no reason to be so spiteful to that which I don't like. Natsu may not be as strong as a character on his own compared to the rest of the cast to me, but it's through him that the other characters are given their stories. Urza would not be the same without Natsu. Gray would not be the same without Natsu. And Lucy would very much not be the same without Natsu. Changing his personality and motivations changes the entire story. Claiming his character is unfitting for his motive to find Igneel is missing the mark so very hard, because in comparing it to Gon and Jing, or even Luffy and the One Piece he wants to find, all things that very much exist, I miss that for Natsu, Igneel is something completely intangible. He's dead. While his spirit still lingered, Igneel was no longer alive, and Natsu was completely unaware of his loss. Even in finally being reunited with his spirit, he pushes to be with him as Igneel tries to remain distant. But it's a fleeting moment. The fighting concludes, and Igneel is taken from Natsu yet again. Their later encounter is with but a figment of Natsu's consciousness, so even despite that second chance in Tartaros, Natsu never got the chance to say goodbye. In his wide-eyed optimism, he was unable to accept his loss until it was too late. Natsu may have that keep-trying attitude, but he could never find Igneel because he was never there to be found. Natsu's journey was not of discovery, but of accepting loss. What trail of breadcrumbs should he have been following? What did his gear away from Fairy Tail show if not that his single-minded focus on what he doesn't have gets in the way of his connections to what he does have? Lucy valued the guild so much more than he did, and it wasn't until he saw that he helped her to bring it together. What pushed him to fight Gray so seriously if not their respective adherence to the wills of their fathers, something at odds with the family they were a part of at Fairy Tail? Dealing with grief and loss, and the family one finds, are two core themes of Fairy Tail. To say Natsu's narrative conflict does nothing for Fairy Tail has to be the most wrong-minded point in the video. Just completely ignorant of the story being delivered. What is the point of art if not to view other perspectives? Natsu's perspective is a fantastical one of Mashma's, an author whose father died early into his life, and that echoes throughout his works. Natsu's journey to find Igneel may not quite be at the forefront of the story, but it never was. Nor did it have to be. Fairy Tail is about Fairy Tail. Lucy is honestly just as important as Natsu, something that very heavily distinguishes the relationship between the story and the main character of Fairy Tail, and the story and the main character of One Piece. And it's not something I cared to respect back in the first part of the tirade, not even a little bit. The title of the video referred to the comparisons people made about Fairy Tail from as soon as it was announced. And considering my stance on them, I can't say I did anything whatsoever in regards to alleviating how comparisons are typically used. Instead, I tried to justify it. Oh, Fairy Tail has some vague similarities, sure, but influence is messy and truly unknowable without direct quote. Including what's shown in this video, an unsighted claim of influence is not worth listening to. And even putting aside the bad comparison, this video misses a fair amount about both characters it discusses, burying the tiny amount of half-decent points it makes in a slog of mediocrity. Never mind the bad structure. I actually start off the overly long analytical tirade on Fairy Tail, making bad points about Luffy being reckless. And how is such a big chunk of the video not about anything relevant to it? I say in the video that there are some things I just can't let go of. And that's clearly shown here as I evoke a bad tendency I had. since when I thought I had a good point, I would feel the need to jam it in, where sometimes in more recent videos I leave potential good points on the cutting room floor to help the script work together. Yeah, I got out all the anger in the tirade. I let go, and moved on. But then I started rewatching this shit and oh my fucking god. Mercifully, there was one more part I was wrong on. I said that there would be more comparing of One Piece and Fairy Tail. And there wasn't. Part 4 of the tirade was originally supposed to be another comparison, but I'm glad it didn't become one, because Beyond Blood was much, much better for not having the comparison to write around. Honestly, it's a type of content I'm glad I moved away from. I never found it easy to write, and now I find it without much worth in the style of video I aim to make. So with part 1 completely torn down, we have 3 more videos to go over 7 more parts. So buckle the fuck up because we aren't even close to done yet. After the tirade on the tirade, I may very well do similar videos on a bunch of my old, bad videos in general. And if you want to see more long-winded takedowns of flawed, or even bad videos, the EWB playlist in the description links to the Weeb Club, including myself, WattheWut, and Vindy, doing this series in which we take our time and breaking down the issues of other annotative videos we find bothersome in one way or another. However, my next video won't be another part in the tirade on the tirade. Not directly. It will be a more typical analysis of mine on a character who is rather unfairly dismissed in the tirade, allowing me to refer to the ideas more easily when I get back to discussing her in this series. So look forward to that. Anyway, be sure to like and subscribe, even the smallest bit of support helps. I'd also deeply appreciate it if you consider Patreon. If you contribute through the largest reward tier, you can have me read or watch something through the backlog builder, which guarantees videos made on something chosen, even if it's just a side channel unscripted rant. And when I get through my planned content, I'm going to be throwing up more patron polls to push me in the direction of which of my many projects lined up I'll be pushing towards next. I'd also like to thank my current patrons: Google, Moz, Mr. Cynical, Flarbu, Thanks Nitrorad, Offline But Not, Tengoon, Mohammed Akim, Bro Rike, and Bayanort. Thank you for watching.